Marcus Chen stared at the rusty hulk floating in the debris field, his salvage scanner beeping weakly at the massive vessel ahead. The ship was enormous, easily 3 times larger than anything he'd ever attempted to salvage, and covered in a dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange symbols covered its hull in patterns that hurt his eyes to look at directly. "Another piece of void-touched junk," he muttered, checking his fuel reserves. The trip to the Kepler graveyard had already cost him most of his savings, and he needed to find something valuable soon, or he'd be eating recycled protein bars for the next 6 months. Marcus had been a salvage operator for 12 years, ever since the Galactic Trade Union had blacklisted him from regular shipping routes. Humans weren't exactly welcome in most sectors of space, tolerated only because they were cheap labor and seemed immune to certain types of radiation that killed other species. Most alien races considered them barely civilized, useful only for dangerous jobs nobody else wanted to do. His ship, the Lucky Strike, was a converted mining vessel held together with hope and spare parts. The life support system wheezed constantly, and the gravity generator had a tendency to cut out at the worst possible times. But it was his, bought with blood, sweat, and every credit he'd ever earned. The scanner beeped again, showing massive energy signatures deep within the ancient vessel. Marcus frowned at the readings. Energy signatures meant power cores, and power cores meant valuable salvage, but something was wrong with the numbers. The energy output was unlike anything in his database. "Computer, run a comparison check on those energy readings," he ordered. "No match found in current database. Readings suggest technology approximately 15,000 years old, predating known galactic civilizations." Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. 15,000 years old meant precursor tech. The precursors were the legendary race that had supposedly ruled the galaxy before disappearing without a trace. Their technology was the stuff of myths and dreams, worth more than entire star systems. He guided the Lucky Strike closer to the ancient vessel, his hands trembling slightly on the controls. The ship's hull was seamless, as if grown rather than built. No visible airlocks or docking ports marred its surface. As he approached, his ship's lights seemed to dim, as though the ancient vessel was drinking in the illumination. "Warning! Unknown energy field detected. Recommend maintaining safe distance," his computer announced. "Override warning," Marcus replied. He'd come too far to turn back now. If this was really precursor tech, it could change everything. He could pay off his debts, buy a real ship, maybe even get off the salvage circuit entirely. As the Lucky Strike drew within 50 meters of the hulk, something extraordinary happened. Lines of blue light began tracing across the ancient ship's surface, following the strange symbols carved into its hull. The patterns pulsed like a heartbeat, growing brighter with each pulse. "What the hell?" Marcus whispered, watching in amazement as sections of the hull began to shift and rearrange themselves. A docking port irised open directly in front of his ship, perfectly sized for the Lucky Strike's airlock. His computer was going crazy, alarms blaring as it detected massive energy surges throughout the ancient vessel. "Marcus, I strongly advise immediate retreat. Energy patterns suggest active defensive systems." But Marcus wasn't listening. He was staring at his scanner displays, watching as the ancient ship's power systems came online one by one. Fusion reactors that dwarfed anything in known space began warming up. Gravity generators powerful enough to influence nearby asteroids started spinning. And deep in the ship's core, something else was awakening. "Computer, begin docking procedures," he ordered, his voice barely steady. "Marcus, this violates every safety protocol in my programming. I cannot override all safety protocols. Authorization Chen 77 Alpha." The computer fell silent for a moment, then reluctantly began the docking sequence. The Lucky Strike slid into the ancient vessel's docking port like a key fitting into a lock. Marcus felt a gentle thump as the airlocks sealed together, He sat in his pilot's chair for several minutes, trying to process what had just happened. The ancient ship had responded to his presence, opened itself to him. That shouldn't be possible. Precursor ruins were supposed to be dead, empty shells left behind by a vanished civilization. Marcus checked his environmental sensors. The ancient ship had atmosphere, perfectly breathable for humans. The temperature was a comfortable 21 degrees Celsius. Gravity was slightly lighter than Earth standard, but well within human tolerance. It was as if the ship had adjusted its environment specifically for him. Taking a deep breath, Marcus suited up in his salvage gear and approached the airlock. His hands shook as he initiated the opening sequence. Whatever lay beyond that door would change his life forever, for better or worse. The airlock cycled open, revealing a corridor that stretched into blue-lit darkness. The walls were covered in the same strange symbols he'd seen on the hull, but now they were glowing softly, providing gentle illumination. The floor was smooth and warm beneath his boots, and he could hear a faint humming sound, like the ship itself was singing. Marcus took his first steps into the ancient vessel, his scanner recording everything. The corridor was vast, easily large enough to drive a ground vehicle through. The architecture was unlike anything he'd seen, all flowing curves and organic shapes that seemed to pulse with life. As he walked deeper into the ship, Marcus began to notice something strange. The symbols on the walls were changing, rearranging themselves as he passed. At first, he thought it was his imagination, but when he stopped to look closely, he could actually watch them shift and flow like living things. "Hello?" he called out, his voice echoing strangely in the corridor. "Is anyone here?" The humming sound grew louder in response, and the symbols on the walls pulsed brighter. Marcus felt a strange tingling sensation, as if the ship was scanning him. Then, impossibly, words began forming in the symbols on the nearest wall. Human words, written in standard galactic script. "Welcome, Marcus Chen of Earth. We have been waiting for you." Marcus staggered backward, his heart pounding. The ship knew his name, not just his species, but his actual name. That was impossible unless— "You're alive," he whispered. The symbols shifted again. "Alive" is not quite accurate. We are the remnant consciousness of the vessel Eternal Wanderer, last ship of the precursor expedition fleet. For 15,000 years we have waited in this graveyard for one capable of bonding with our systems. "Bonding?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew what that meant. "Your species possesses a unique neural structure that resonates with precursor biotechnology. You can interface directly with our systems, control them as easily as moving your own limbs. We offer partnership, Marcus Chen. Our knowledge and capabilities in exchange for your mobility and purpose." Marcus felt dizzy. This was beyond anything he'd imagined when he'd started his salvage run. A living precursor ship offering partnership with a human salvage operator? It sounded like something out of a fever dream. "What kind of partnership?" he asked carefully. The symbols rearranged themselves into what looked almost like a smile. "We will show you wonders beyond your imagination. Technologies that will revolutionize your understanding of the universe. Wealth beyond the dreams of any galactic mogul. All we ask in return is that you help us explore the galaxy once more, to see what has become of the civilizations that rose after our creators departed." Marcus looked around the vast corridor, his mind reeling with possibilities. He thought about his debts, his failing ship, the way other species look down on humans as inferior beings. This could change everything, not just for him, but for all of humanity. "How do I know you won't take over my mind or something?" he asked. "The bond requires willing participation from both parties. We cannot force control, only offer guidance and access to our capabilities. You would remain fully yourself, simply enhanced by our technologies." Marcus took a deep breath and made the decision that would change the course of galactic history. "All right, Eternal Wanderer, let's make a deal." The moment Marcus agreed to the partnership, the corridor around him transformed. The blue lights intensified, and he felt a strange tingling sensation spreading through his body. The symbols on the walls began moving faster, swirling around him in patterns that made his head spin. "Place your hand on the interface panel," the ship's consciousness instructed. A section of the wall glowed brighter, revealing what looked like a handprint scanner. Marcus hesitated for only a moment before pressing his palm against the warm surface. The sensation was immediate and overwhelming. Information flooded his mind, not as words or images, but as pure knowledge. He could suddenly sense every system aboard the Eternal Wanderer, from the massive fusion cores to the smallest environmental sensors. The ship was incredibly advanced, far beyond anything the current galactic civilizations had achieved. Its hull was made of living metal that could repair itself and adapt to different threats. The engines could fold space-time, allowing near-instantaneous travel across vast distances. Most importantly, the ship contained manufacturing systems that could create virtually anything from raw materials. "This is incredible," Marcus gasped, his mind reeling from the flood of new information. "No wonder nobody wanted to salvage you. They couldn't even understand what you are." "Most species lack the neural flexibility to interface with our biotechnology," the ship explained. "The few who have attempted bonding with precursor vessels have either failed completely or been driven insane by the experience. Humans appear to possess a unique mental resilience that makes the process possible." Marcus spent the next several hours exploring the ship, marveling at technologies that seemed like magic. The manufacturing bay could create anything from simple tools to complex electronics using nothing but energy and base materials. The medical bay contained healing chambers that could repair any injury or illness. The ship's database held the accumulated knowledge of an entire galactic civilization. "Why did the precursors disappear?" Marcus asked as he examined a weapon system that could destroy entire fleets. "They transcended physical existence," the ship replied. "Our creators evolved beyond the need for material bodies, becoming beings of pure energy and consciousness. Before they departed, they left behind ships like myself to serve as teachers and guides for younger civilizations that would eventually reach a similar level of development." Marcus nodded, beginning to understand the scope of what he'd stumbled into. This wasn't just about salvage anymore. He was holding technologies that could reshape the entire galaxy. "The question is," he said aloud, "what do we do with all this?" "We begin carefully," the ship advised. "Introducing too much advanced technology too quickly could destabilize galactic civilization. However, certain innovations could be shared gradually to benefit all species while establishing your position in galactic society." Over the following weeks, Marcus worked with the Eternal Wanderer to develop a plan. They would start small, introducing technologies that were advanced, but not incomprehensibly so. The ship's manufacturing systems could create materials with properties that exceeded anything currently available, but which could theoretically be developed through conventional research. Their first product was a new type of hull plating that was lighter than standard materials but 10 times stronger. Marcus used the ship's fabricators to create sample plates, then took them to Kepler Station, the nearest trading post. The reaction was immediate and intense. Materials scientists couldn't understand how the plating was made, but they could measure its properties. Within hours, Marcus had representatives from a dozen major corporations trying to buy the manufacturing rights. "I'm sorry, gentlemen," Marcus told the crowd of alien businessmen gathered in the station's conference room, "but this is exclusive human technology. We're only interested in partnerships that recognize human technological sovereignty." The room erupted in protests. The Zephyrians clicked their mandibles angrily, insisting that such advanced materials couldn't possibly be of human origin. The crystalline Vorthak hummed in harmonic frequencies that translated as deep skepticism. Even the normally diplomatic Centaurians seemed agitated by the suggestion that humans could develop something so advanced. "You will provide manufacturing specifications," demanded Krex, the Zephyrian trade representative. "Primitive species cannot be permitted to monopolize advanced technologies." Marcus smiled coldly. "I'm afraid that's not how free market economics works, Krex. If you want access to our new materials, you'll need to negotiate fair terms." The threats started almost immediately. Several corporations made it clear that they considered confiscating the technology from a primitive human to be well within their rights. Marcus had expected this reaction, which was why he'd come prepared. "I should probably mention," he said casually, "that these hull plates are just our first commercial product. We have much more interesting things in development." He activated a holographic projector showing technical specifications for a new type of faster-than-light drive that was 30% more efficient than current models. The room fell silent as the assembled representatives realized the implications. "You're claiming your species has developed not just new materials, but improved FTL technology?" The Centaurian representative's translator made her skepticism clear. "I'm not claiming anything," Marcus replied. "I'm demonstrating it." He led the group to the station's observation deck, where the Lucky Strike was docked, except it wasn't the Lucky Strike anymore. The Eternal Wanderer had transformed itself, taking on the appearance of a heavily modified human salvage vessel. To casual observation, it looked like Marcus had simply made extensive upgrades to his ship. "Computer, prepare for FTL jump to coordinates 77 Mark 12, Marcus ordered. "Jump prepared," the ship responded in a voice that sounded nothing like the Eternal Wanderer's consciousness. "Estimated time to Rigel Station 47 minutes. The assembled crowd gasped. Rigel Station was 3 hours away using conventional FTL drives even for military vessels. A human salvage ship completing the journey in under an hour was impossible. "Initiating jump," Marcus announced. The transformation was subtle but unmistakable. Instead of the violent spatial distortions caused by conventional FTL drives, the ship simply seemed to fade slightly before snapping back into sharp focus. They had traveled 3 light years in an instant. "Time to Rigel Station, 46 minutes, 57 seconds, the ship announced. The silence stretched for nearly a minute before Krex found his voice. That's not possible. No single jump can cover that distance." "Human technology is full of surprises," Marcus said with a grin. "We've learned to think outside conventional parameters." The bidding war that followed was everything Marcus had hoped for. Corporation representatives offered increasingly desperate terms for access to human innovations. The Terran Colonial Authority, previously dismissive of human technological capabilities, suddenly found themselves in the unprecedented position of being courted by major galactic powers. But Marcus wasn't interested in simply selling advanced technology to the highest bidder. Working with the Eternal Wanderer, he began establishing a network of human-controlled trading posts and manufacturing facilities. Each installation was protected by security systems that were actually scaled-down versions of the ship's defensive technologies. Within months, human space had transformed from a collection of barely tolerated frontier worlds into the galaxy's newest economic powerhouse. Other species found themselves dependent on human innovations for everything from basic materials to starship components. The transformation wasn't without challenges. Several major corporations attempted hostile takeovers of human facilities, only to discover that human security technology was far more advanced than anyone had realized. Pirates, who tried to raid human cargo convoys, found their ships mysteriously disabled by weapons that seemed to ignore conventional shielding. "The galaxy is beginning to take notice," the Eternal Wanderer observed as Marcus reviewed reports from across human space. "Several governments are demanding explanations for humanity's sudden technological advancement." Marcus leaned back in his command chair, watching holographic displays showing the growing network of human-controlled trade routes. Let them demand. They'll get the same answer everyone else gets. Humans are more innovative than anyone gave us credit for. The truth was, Marcus was beginning to understand the real scope of what he and the ship were accomplishing. They weren't just making him wealthy, or even establishing human technological superiority. They were fundamentally reshaping the balance of power in the galaxy. How long before someone figures out that this technology is beyond current galactic capabilities? Marcus asked. The more successful we become, the more scrutiny we'll face, the ship admitted. Eventually, someone will realize that human technology has advanced impossibly quickly. We must be prepared for that eventuality. Marcus nodded, his mind already working on contingency plans. He'd gone from a struggling salvage operator to one of the most powerful figures in human space. But he knew the real challenges were just beginning. The galaxy's established powers wouldn't tolerate humanity's sudden rise forever, and when they moved against him, he'd need to be ready. Then we'd better make sure we're indispensable before that happens, he said, studying star charts that showed human influence spreading across the galaxy like wildfire. 2 years after his first contact with the Eternal Wanderer, Marcus Chen sat in the observation lounge of his flagship, watching as the Galactic Council's most powerful fleet assembled outside New Geneva Station. The massive orbital facility had become the heart of human space, a gleaming symbol of humanity's transformation from galactic outcasts to the galaxy's dominant economic force. They're really going through with it, Admiral Sarah Reyes said, joining Marcus at the viewport. She commanded the Human Defense Fleet, which had grown from a handful of converted civilian ships to the most advanced naval force in known space. Of course they are, Marcus replied, watching the alien warships take formation. We've upset the established order too much for them to ignore us any longer. The ultimatum had arrived 3 days ago. The Galactic Council, dominated by the Zephyrian Empire and their allies, demanded that humanity share all technological advances with the galactic community. Failure to comply would result in military action to liberate human innovations for the benefit of all species. Marcus had expected this moment for months. Humanity's rapid technological advancement had made too many enemies among the established powers. Species that had ruled the galaxy for millennia couldn't accept that primitive humans had somehow leapfrogged their civilizations overnight. "Sir," came a voice from behind them. Marcus turned to see Lieutenant Torres, his aide, approaching with a worried expression. "The Council fleet is requesting permission to board and inspect our facilities. They're claiming authority under Galactic Security Resolution 2847. Marcus smiled grimly. "Tell them permission denied, and remind them they're in sovereign human space without invitation." As Torres hurried away, Admiral Reyes studied the tactical displays showing the enemy fleet's composition. "They've brought everything they have, 400 ships including 12 dreadnoughts. That's enough firepower to glass entire star systems." "It would be," Marcus agreed, "if they were fighting a conventional enemy." The truth was, Marcus had spent the last 2 years preparing for this confrontation. With the Eternal Wanderer's guidance, he'd established a network of automated defense platforms throughout human space, each one equipped with technology that made conventional weapons obsolete. More importantly, he'd used the ship's manufacturing capabilities to build something that would change warfare forever. "Fleet Command is requesting orders," Admiral Reyes reported. "Do we engage?" Marcus activated his command interface, feeling the familiar sensation of linking with the Eternal Wanderer's consciousness. Through the ship's sensors, he could perceive every vessel in the enemy fleet, their weapons, their weaknesses, their crew complements down to individual beings. "Open a channel to the Galactic Council fleet," he ordered. The main display activated, showing the bridge of the Zephyrian dreadnought Sovereign Authority. Fleet Admiral Krex, the same Zephyrian trade representative Marcus had dealt with 2 years ago, glared at him with undisguised hatred. "Marcus Chen," Krex said, his translator making his voice sound mechanical and cold. "You will surrender immediately and submit to Galactic Council authority. Your species has stolen technologies that belong to all civilized beings." Marcus leaned back in his chair, projecting calm confidence. "Admiral Krex, you're trespassing in sovereign territory. I suggest you withdraw before this situation escalates. You dare threaten the combined might of the galactic community." Krex's mandibles clicked furiously. "Your pathetic human fleet is outnumbered 20-1. "Numbers aren't everything," Marcus replied. "But since you seem determined to do this the hard way, let me show you what human innovation has accomplished." He nodded to Admiral Reyes, who transmitted the activation codes for the defense network. Throughout human space, thousands of hidden platforms came online, their targeting systems locking onto every ship in the enemy fleet. The effect was immediate and devastating, not through violence but through a simple demonstration of technological superiority. Every ship in the Council fleet found its weapon systems completely disabled, their engines offline, their communications jammed. They hung helpless in space, reduced to drifting hulks in a matter of seconds. "What? What have you done?" Krex demanded, his earlier arrogance replaced by fear. "I've given you a practical lesson in the dangers of underestimating humanity," Marcus replied. "Your ships are unharmed, but completely powerless. You could remain here for the rest of your lives without being able to fire a single shot or move a single meter." On his private channel, the Eternal Wanderer spoke softly. "The demonstration is effective, but we should be careful not to humiliate them too severely. Defeated enemies can become future allies if treated with respect." Marcus nodded slightly, then addressed the enemy fleet again. "However, I'm not unreasonable. I'll restore your ship's functionality on one condition. You return to your respective governments and explain that humanity is not some primitive species to be bullied. We are your equals in this galaxy, and we expect to be treated as such." The silence stretched for long minutes as Krex and the other fleet commanders processed what had happened. Their combined armada, the pride of galactic military might, had been neutralized without a single shot being fired. The implications were staggering. "How?" Krex finally asked. "How did a salvage operator become the most powerful being in the galaxy?" Marcus considered the question carefully. The truth was more complex than Krex could imagine. Over the past 2 years, the Eternal Wanderer had revealed more and more of its capabilities. The ship wasn't just a repository of precursor technology. It was a test, designed to identify species ready to take the next step in galactic evolution. "I found something in the Kepler graveyard," Marcus said finally. "Something that taught me that the galaxy is far larger and more complex than any of us realized. There are powers out there that make our squabbles over territory and resources seem petty." As if summoned by his words, new contacts appeared on the sensor displays. Ships unlike anything in galactic databases materialized from hyperspace, their sleek forms radiating power that made even the Eternal Wanderer seem primitive. They took positions around both fleets, neither threatening nor retreating. "The Watchers," the ship's consciousness whispered in Marcus's mind. "I had wondered when they would reveal themselves." A new voice filled the communication channels, speaking in harmonics that bypassed all translators and communicated meaning directly to the mind. "We are the Watchers, shepherds of galactic development. The time of testing is complete. Humanity has proven ready for the next phase of evolution." The assembled fleets hung in stunned silence as the beings who had secretly guided galactic civilization for millions of years finally revealed themselves. Marcus realized that his partnership with the Eternal Wanderer had been orchestrated from the beginning, part of a vast plan to elevate humanity to their destined role in the cosmos. "Marcus Chen," the Watcher spoke directly to him. "You have used the gifts we provided wisely. demonstrating that humanity possesses the qualities necessary to join the galactic community as leaders rather than followers. The Eternal Wanderer was our final test. Marcus felt the weight of destiny settling on his shoulders. What happens now? Now you help guide the other species toward the same enlightenment you have achieved. The galaxy faces challenges that will require unity and cooperation. The Precursor's greatest enemy stirs in the void between galaxies, and only a united civilization will be strong enough to face what comes. In the days that followed, Marcus found himself at the center of a transformation that dwarfed even humanity's recent rise. The revelation that the Watchers had been secretly guiding galactic development forced every species to reconsider their place in the universe. Old rivalries seemed petty in the face of cosmic threats that required unprecedented cooperation. The Galactic Council was reformed with humanity holding a leadership position, not through conquest, but through demonstration of wisdom and capability. Marcus became the first human to hold the title of Galactic Coordinator, responsible for preparing civilization for challenges that lay ahead. Standing on the bridge of the Eternal Wanderer, now openly recognized as a precursor vessel, Marcus watched as ships from across the galaxy gathered for the first unified fleet exercises. Species that had been enemies for millennia worked together, sharing technology and knowledge in preparation for the trials ahead. "You've come a long way from salvaging scrap in the Kepler graveyard," Admiral Reyes observed. Marcus smiled, feeling the vast presence of the Eternal Wanderer in his mind, no longer alien but familiar as his own thoughts. "We all have. The real question is whether we're ready for what comes next." Through the ship's sensors, he could perceive the edges of known space, where ancient evils stirred in the darkness between stars. The Watchers had prepared them as much as possible, but the final test would come when those shadows reached the galaxy. "We'll be ready," he said with quiet confidence. Humanity didn't survive this long by giving up when things got difficult. The Eternal Wanderer hummed its agreement, and together they watched the fleet of united species prepare for humanity's greatest adventure. Marcus Chen, former salvage operator turned galactic leader, had found his destiny among the stars. But more importantly, he had helped humanity find theirs. The ancient starship that nobody wanted to salvage had indeed made its pilot a Galactic Mogul, but in the process, it had transformed him into something far more valuable, the bridge between humanity's past and its cosmic future.